If most of you have been on previous webinars, your favorite dynamic duo is back. Welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm Christina Caesar and I'll be moderating today's session. Today's webinar is the third in our series, How to Secure Your Data, and it will be covering cloud app security. Just a reminder, this session is being recorded and please make sure to send any questions through the Q&A function within Teams. Just a little bit about us. Synergy Technical is an IT consulting firm headquartered in Richmond, Virginia. We have clients in over 70 countries and all 50 states and manage over 2 million licenses of Microsoft 365 for clients through licensing and managed services. We excel at securing a productive workforce in complex environments and have been recognized as such. Just this past February, we were awarded the Microsoft 365 Security Deployment Partner of the Year award. It's always a mouthful. A large part of that success is the work done by today's presenter, Adrian Amos. Adrian is a deep-level Microsoft security expert that runs hands-on workshops around the nation where end users experience the cybersecurity capabilities of Microsoft's EMS suite. Adrian has had the honor of running both productivity and security workshops at Microsoft Ignite for the last 2 years. And honestly, Adrian and I got this down. We do so many webinars together at this point. Love working with him. These are always great. He's totally gifted. And Adrian, with that, I will hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Christina. I'm getting a little casual here. I got my t-shirt on and being disruptive. I'm having a great time. All right. So, yes, we are finishing or rounding out the back half of our discussion around how to secure your data. And so actually today's conversation is going to be 100% focused on Microsoft's Cloud App Security product. And if you're familiar with the history of this product, this is one of those where Microsoft realized that somebody else was doing it better. They bought the product, they bought Adallom years ago. They spent a couple of years trying to forklift it out of AWS and into Azure. They renamed it Cloud App Security, and we've been off to the races ever since. I have Cloud App Security running in my demo environment. We also use it here. I'm going to be continuing to show you content out of my demo environment. So what is Cloud App Security? Well, it's actually kind of three different things, right? If you go way back to 2015, before Microsoft integrated Adallom's product, they offered a product called Cloud App Discovery that was integrated as part of an Azure AD Premium capability that allowed you to go out and find what users were using in your environment. They also began integrating this Cloud App Security, but it was actually a totally different interface. We fast forward to today, and we still have all three levels of the product. So the one being the discovery of what your users are using, the second being controls around your Office 365 deployment, and the third and the big grand mama poobah version being all of that put together plus controls around your other third-party apps. So the reason why I'm telling you a little bit about this history is that the announcement just came out a couple days ago that Microsoft is reintroducing the name Cloud App Discovery again. It is still actually the Cloud App Security interface, but it is the portion that is licensed directly as a part of Azure AD Premium. So everything old is new again, and with that out of the way, we're going to dive right into it. So Cloud App Security. Microsoft has recognized that CASBs are probably the most important component of securely deploying a SaaS forward productivity workload environment for your remote users, right? They're out in the wild. They're not coming through your firewalls necessarily anymore. They're getting access to SaaS applications. We need to make sure that we keep the guardrails on for these users and give them secure, productive environment into their apps and also with their data. Now, you might be saying, well, we talked about apps a few weeks ago. Yeah, we did. We talked about securely deploying and configuring apps, but the concept of the app and the data are so intrinsically tied that for the purposes of today's conversation, we're going to view that whole segment as in a holistic view. You have, in some cases, apps that are their own data, right? So we're going to look at that whole space kind of in one tool. We're going to look at it in this Cloud App Security space. So what we're going to be able to do is allow certain conditions, certain parameters, certain policies, certain templates, certain rules, however you want to define it, to custom tailor the environment that our users are able to operate in, both in terms of inside of our data sets within Office 365, but also control that experience in the wild. So the first thing we have to do is we have to know what our users are using. The great thing about that is that we actually have a number of ways to consume this data. Cloud App Security in my environment is actually keying off the fact that my computers are enrolled in Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection. Defender ATP is pulling 100% of every event that ever happens on the machine, and it really doesn't need a lot of that content to do its EDR job, right? If the machine's not under attack, I don't really need to know what all it's doing, but I still need to collect that data for forensic purposes. Well, because I don't need it for ongoing logging, I'm going to just chuck it over the fence to Cloud App Security, so you can start to see what URLs the users are going to. And once we're doing that, we can start correlating those URLs and SaaS applications and figuring out what does the landscape look like in our environment. Then we can start to categorize that information, and we can start to make intelligent decisions on what we want to allow our users to use. So in our environment here, we have 8 apps that have been detected coming from 18 different IP addresses being used by 5 users over 6 machines, consuming 3.4 gigabytes of data. I can't use this to go through and actually do like line by line proxy logs, but what I can do is I can see what kind of applications my users are using. Now you're going to come back with a whole lot more than 8, guaranteed. This is just a very small environment with very few users. But my applications that are coming back are categorized, right? I can see the actual names of the apps that are here, how much data is going across those apps. I can see what the categories are. I can see and calculate and configure a risk metric. I can see who my big internet users are, and I can see where the application headquarters are around the world. Now, you're probably seeing these green, red, and blue lines here as being, pretty significant, and I guarantee you, yes, they are. They're super significant. What we are doing here is we're going in and we're saying, okay, discover all the apps that my users use. In this case, let's look at the 8 apps. My users use these 8 apps. They're using some Microsoft internal stuff, no big deal. They're using a little bit of Google, maybe we care about that, and they're using some content management. All of these apps then are then scored, and then all of these apps, we're going to make a decision about whether or not we want to allow these users to use them. If I check the green box, I bless this app, it is sanctioned. If I check the circle, the red unsanctioned box, this application will actually be blocked. And I mean that legitimately. It's not just me saying don't report on it. I mean, this will actually write a rule back to Defender ATP blocking access to that application. And we'll go into showing you how that works in just a little bit here. But we can actually come in here, we can come in and we can look at these applications and we can say, hey, what even is this thing, right? What are my users doing? I can see my usage reports on it, how many transactions, sources, addresses, all that kind of fun stuff. I can get really good deep level information about this application. I can see general information about when it was created, how long it's been published, what their security capabilities are, what their compliance offerings are in this space, and what their legal capabilities are too. And everything has hover over information that I can drill down into. And if you notice right here, I can suggest an improvement. So if I'm working with an application and it's getting a red X and it says they don't support a password policy, but I know because I just spoke to their sales rep and they say, hey, yeah, we just rolled that out yesterday. I can click on suggest an improvement, and this will legitimately key Microsoft to go back and reinvestigate. So Microsoft loves to give themselves 10s on their applications, right? So we're going to dig into that in a minute here too. But I can go through and I can actually see who my users are that are using this application, how much they're uploading, downloading, transactions, and if there are any alerts associated with this application. Now, I get a ton of alerts that come out of all of my applications, so we'll dig into that a little bit too. But we're going to actually kind of just come down through the list here and look at how all this works. So I know what my applications are. I know what my app categories are, right? No big deal. And I've dug through and looked at my discovered applications, but we can also do discovered resources. So in this case, I don't actually have any resources, but if I had external applications or things like that in AWS, in GCP, whatever, I can actually monitor those things here too. So I can bring my management credentials for those interfaces, plug them into Cloud App Security, and actually get visibility into what my users are doing in those spaces. I can see what all my IP addresses are that my users are coming from. In my case, they're going to be principally, protected or internal Class Cs in most cases. I'm going to be able to see IPv4s for my users that are out there, or IPv6s for mobile devices in many cases. I'm going to see who my users are, all that fun stuff. I'm going to be able to track my users not just by how much data they're using, but I'm going to be able to go into each user and figure out what is their history, what is their machine history, what have they been using a bunch of different machines. All this stuff is cross-correlated for us too without having to leave this space. But the most common and most overarching use that we have seen over the years for cloud app security is actually right here, just looking at the cloud app catalog. And this has been probably the not just the biggest use case, the biggest selling point, the biggest everything, right? You got a new project coming online, and for that project, you're going to need some sort of vendor choice. And maybe in our case, we're going to choose, it's going to be a cloud storage solution. So I can just search for that as a category. You can see I've got thousands of known services out here. I'm going to say cloud storage. All right. I have 243 options that Microsoft knows about from a cloud storage perspective. And you can see I've already come through here and done a little bit of, actively blessing some things. And if I go far enough down, you see I've actively blocked some things. But we want to say that we're going to use some sort of a cloud storage solution, but we have to work within certain parameters. Maybe we have a requirement that we support multi-factor authentication in any cloud storage provider that we use. Okay, so I'm going to click that, and it's going to cut the list down from 200 some to 61 possible options. But we also are going to need to be able to support SAML. So now I've got two things selected, right? This is cumulative. Now I'm down to 24 options. Well, now I actually also want to overlay a compliance risk factor. I want to know how many, or if I can sort this down to organizations that can meet HIPAA requirements. And wow, that might have been, okay, no, here we go. We still have 20 options left. So it looks like I've got some great internal Microsoft choices, right? I can roll out Box as much as I want to. I can also look at Titan File. Let's see what they do. It looks like they really don't have a lot of compliance options, right? So if we have some SOC 2 concerns or Safe Harbor, Privacy Shield, whatever it is, we're going to need to come in here and block this application. And again, if I tag this as unsanctioned, it's going to come up and say, are you sure? I mean, this is legitimately going to block this thing. And I've done this before on a few others, so I'm not going to actually bother with that right now. But I can also come in here and do something like say, hey, we're not really super thrilled about this, but we actually have a business justification for why we have to do this. I can put a note in here. I can override the app score, and that's going to be important later for when we do some policies around how we sculpt our applications. But in our case, let's say we have, it's not going to be cloud storage for us. We're going to get rid of that as a reminder, but we are all in this organization at Synergy Technical. We are all a little bit psycho about running, cycling, swimming, all that weird triathlon stuff, probably all in our midlife crises, and Ironmans are a required part of that. So we're going to say, hey, we're all using Garmin's. Okay, I'm going to just look and see what I've got in my environment here. Oops, I should probably type the whole thing. And I have to clear my cloud storage. Oh, you know what? It turns out I'm not a good searcher. Because they don't support any of these. All right. So I got Garmin Connect here, right? They do not do a hot job, but I have blessed this application in my environment because I put a note in here and said the CEO uses this, do not block. So I can either come in here and suggest a score override, I can explicitly bless it, I can put a note in here as to remind any future admin as to why we have done this. Not necessarily recommending that you bless Garmin Connect, but it's certainly an option, certainly not after their July. Anyway. So we've got our cloud app catalog. We can come through here. We can see what all the applications are. Again, there are absolutely thousands of applications that are in here. And once we've come in and we've whitelisted or blessed them with their, explicitly sanctioned, that doesn't really do anything. Blessing an application doesn't really do anything. But what it does is it allows us to see exotic things like when our users have kind of stepped out of the guardrails a little bit. In this case, I can see that they're, for the most part, using the collaboration tools that I've blessed, but there's a little bit of traffic going to something that maybe I don't care so much about, but I'm generally going to be looking at blessed as saying, for the most part, my users are staying within the apps that I want them to. So how am I getting all that content in there, right? So I mentioned that when my environment, I'm pulling all this stuff from Defender ATP. That shows up as being a Windows 10 endpoint users report. But I have a lot of other ways that I can get that content there. I can actually pull snapshot reports off of my firewalls. Oh, and I'm going to block my own pop-ups here. Let me see. Okay. I can create snapshot reports off of dozens and dozens and dozens of different firewall types. And if I come in here and say create a new one, I'm going to take a firewall dump and I'm going to come from any one of these types of devices. Pretty decently long list, right? And if I don't see what I want, I can throw in a CEF or a W3C or whatever, drop it in there. And I'm going to be able to also choose to anonymize private information. So if I've got usernames with it, I can actually abstract that out. So, you know, this isn't necessarily looking to smack the hammer down on people. This is just understanding what the environment is. We can set this up as a snapshot report, or we can actually set up continuous reports. So you can actually set your firewall to just continuously ship data through a syslog request directly to Cloud App Security. Absolutely, totally support it. But once we've gotten in there and we've set those applications up that are sanctioned or unsanctioned, that's where our block or a link into Microsoft's Defender ATP is going to come in. And this block unsanctioned apps, when I block an app, it's going to create a list of URLs in Defender ATP to explicitly block. And it's going to come up here and it's going to say, hey, look, I only blocked one application, but I need all of the individual URLs for it to be blocked. And I don't have to know what they are. Cloud App Security knows, it reports all that to Defender ATP. That then goes out here and allows me to build these rules. Now, what's really cool here is I can actually set an application to be blocked from Cloud App Security. Then I can come over here to Defender ATP and say, hey, you know what? The CEO likes TikTok. I want this blocked, but I want to exclude the executives so they can TikTok all day long, right? You're not going to do that. Please tell me you're not going to do that. But you can, right? You can get in here and make this as granular as you want. You can impose this on the workforce and let the executives get away with it for fun. So we've discovered our apps. We've blocked certain apps. We've put on snapshot reports. We're getting our data sent into Cloud App Security. Now we want to do some additional stuff, right? We know what the apps are. Now it's time to actually go out and do some investigations. We're not just looking at what are the applications they're using. We are looking at how they are using those applications. This is not just protect the apps. It's also user behavior analytics. So we're looking at what are the users actually doing in this space. You can see I logged in earlier and dismissed a whole bunch of alerts in bulk. They're not relevant, super important information, but I can come in here and everything that is done is audited. I can see 100% of all the files that exist across my entire digital estate. And that's an important statement, right? It's easy to say, yeah, I can see all my Office 365 files. But if we have also provided those administrative credentials to AWS, to Dropbox, to all that fun stuff, we can then also see all of the files that are in those spaces and make sure that the right kinds of files get to those places or are excluded from those places. So in my case, I might want to look and say, hey, amongst all my files, have I done anything like crazy exotic, like accidentally shared files to the public with a link? Are there files? And yes, it turns out there sure as heck are. And I don't have to be an administrator well, let me take that back. I don't have to be an expert in SharePoint. And anybody who knows me will tell you that I usually cringe at the idea of having to do anything in SharePoint. I don't have to. If it's in SharePoint, if it's in OneDrive for Business, if it's in Box, Dropbox, AWS, GCP, whatever, as long as I can see it, I can manage it. So if I've got a file out here that's marked internal doc.docx and I'm like, oh, yikes, why is that available with a public link? I actually have administrative controls that I can take over this thing. I can go find the file. I can send an alert to somebody. I can actually encrypt the file in place without having to go and find it. I can put in user quarantine so they get a nastygram, but I can also take the requirement that I manage this out. And we'll get into that in policies in just a little bit. So I don't have to do all of this fun stuff myself. I can let the system take a lot of action here. In terms of the users, though, because we are actually assessing their behaviors and putting analytics on it, we can actually go into any one of the users and see, hey, what kind of stuff are they doing, and are they generating an investigation priority, which is actually a prioritized list. Yeah, there we go. I, as the administrator, am now should investigate myself because I've taken a number of actions that could be conceived as part of an attack if someone were doing it. Everybody who's an admin, they're going to be flagged as being an admin, although they're not technically right now. But I can come into any one of these users, and I'm going to be able to go to the user page, and I'm going to be able to see all of the actions that user has taken. Let me actually bother Diego, because I play with Diego more than I play with anybody else. I'm going to be able to come in here and see what Diego has been doing. No risky activity for the last several days. Let's see if I come back in here. No, well, no, I didn't break Diego, apparently. I should have broken him. But I'm going to be able to come back here and see what his score is over time. So you can see I had been doing some stuff with Diego, but he's kind of fallen off the radar because I haven't done anything bad. But if he does crazy stuff like logging in from 2 different countries in a short period of time, or logging in from 50 different machines, downloading a whole bunch of files, doing all kinds of crazy stuff like that, those activities will have security scores associated with them and tell me the identity may be at risk, or the user may be doing something exotic like getting ready to resign. So we want to be able to take actions and investigate against those sort of things. We can actually also integrate our Azure Security Center information here too, our AWS security configuration, all this fun stuff, and yes, even regulatory compliance controls to bring all this information together under one screen. Whew. There's a lot, right? And I mentioned being able to see everything that's in the digital estate. So what I do is, this is my reference list. If I'm using any applications that are in this list, I don't just have visibility into the users using it. I have actual API integration into these tools. So if the user is doing something crazy, like they're putting files marked for internal use only, but with a ton of credit card numbers on it, and I don't want that stuff going to Dropbox, well, that's when I'm going to start coming over here and I'm going to start designing policies about what to do with data when we find it in particular places, shared by particular people at particular times. Whew! So what we have then is not just the visibility into what they're doing, right? We have control. And Microsoft has been using a pair of the policies that are here for the last several years internally to predict with a greater than 80% accuracy when a user is getting ready to resign. They look for 2 things: mass download by a single user followed by mass delete by a single user. Generally, that means that the user has pulled other stuff into their USB drive, stuck it in their pocket, and deleted off their OneDrive. They're getting ready to walk out the door. We have these canned policies built in here by default. I did not create any of these policies. They are all just here ready for you to come in and turn on. But I did have to do some policies too. So mentioned TikTok, right? Users in the environment found a new fun app they wanted to play with. You as the admin know that TikTok is probably not the best choice. However, you have no idea what is tomorrow's TikTok. You just don't know, right? There's really no way to predict that, short of scouring the internet every single day to say, hey, what are users using? I ain't got time for that. What Cloud App Security does to an extent. What it allows me to do is say, hey, when an application starts trending in my environment, when I start to see daily traffic hitting a certain level, when I start to see user counts hitting a certain level, I then want to know if this is a low trust app, its risk score is not super great, I want to do something with that. I want to send an alert to my IT guy, Alan, and say, hey, there's a new app that's in the environment. But I also want, if the traffic level is high enough, or if there's a reputation risk that's bad enough, to mark this app as unsanctioned. I don't want to mess with this. I don't want to have any more of this in my environment. So now what I can legitimately actually do is, when TikTok Junior pops online tomorrow or next week or whatever, and users start using it, they will trip these alarms. You'll get an email, and then the indicators will be written over here to Cloud App Security. Now, this is actually, to vendor ATP. I have tested this out, and this works really, really well. I think that my open alerts, yeah, unfortunately they've expired, but I pulled out a whole bunch of machines, set my thresholds really low, 5 users, 20 megs, and I just found an application in the list that had a relatively low score, and I just hammered on it. I just beat it up. I mean, it turns out there were only 5 or 6 web pages, but I F5'd like crazy until I generated 20 megs of data. And sure enough, within about 15 to 20 minutes, all of a sudden that URL popped up over here as a blocked application. Completely and totally automated. I didn't have to do anything. I checked as my admin, and I got the email saying that there was a new trending app, and that was it. Situation was resolved before it became a problem. But it's not just looking at new applications, right? We actually need to also be able to do some things. I mentioned that we had publicly shared confidential files. Well, if that's happening, I want to take some level of action here too. If a user is sharing internal documents that have a bunch of credit card numbers and all that kind of fun stuff too, maybe I want to create an alert. Maybe I want to notify somebody. Maybe I want to make that file private automatically. Maybe I want to remove collaborators, which is actually really cool. I can dig into the list of the people who have access to the file and remove them one at a time through this interface. I can actually, in place, encrypt it at a higher level, right? They put it out there as as general information, but maybe we've got our Azure information protection, which we talked about last week or a week before. Well, I can actually go in and set a higher encryption level on that file where it sits programmatically. So even though the user thinks they're being sneaky and they're posting out confidential data, they're actually really not. Or, and this is my favorite one, we can actually take certain file types and say, hey, this can't live here, right? This particular policy was born out of a number of client requests, kind of all on top of each other, about export controls and CUI data. Now, Microsoft will not stand behind this and tell you this is satisfactory for CUI, CMMC, any of that fun stuff. It's not. But this backs up human policies with a technological protection. So what we did was, okay, so maybe we're an organization that deals with AutoCAD documents, but they are not allowed to live in OneDrive for Business. They have to stay on an on-premises file server. Maybe a user just forgets. They make a bad choice. They put something somewhere. That becomes a reportable incident. However, you also have to then do something. In my case, we're saying that this is a DLP issue. This is a data loss prevention issue. We want to identify these by file extension. Once they're identified, we want to immediately get a notification to Alan DeYoung, and then we want to take the governance action of trash the file. Do not keep it, do not wait around. Now, the reason why this doesn't necessarily tick all the boxes for CUI CMMC from a pure technology perspective is that the DLP engine does not run the instant that this happens. So this is allowing the file to get there, and then DLP triggers and runs on that space. So a lot of caveats to that, but you can absolutely say if you have business content that should not live in, say, Dropbox, which would be on the list if I had added it as a managed service, you can say that kind of file data cannot live in Dropbox, or it can, but it has to have this classification label, or it can, but it should remove external users the instant it hits there, right? So I don't want to be able to expose this to external users. So we can do all these great policy content or policy behaviors, and actually I should have clicked on that too. We can actually see when there have been policy matches. Now, I guarantee you there are policy matches against this one. I've tested this out many times. Unfortunately, they do expire after a certain amount of time, so I'm not able to pull it back up. But if you don't see the policy you're looking for, there's tons of templates that we can also come through here and recognize certain user behaviors. We can turn on these policies, just turn them on, create them, name them what you want to do. Wow, there's a lot of things right here in this one. They're pre-canned, so I don't have to do all the hard work of figuring out what these are, and then just roll them out. And I can roll them out as wide or as narrow as I want to. So let me see, we come back over here. Right. So we've done templates, we've done policies, right? Now we want to do alerts. This is also conveniently telling you about when there are breaches to public SaaS applications that you may or may not care about. So I mentioned that you can just turn it on and it will just tell you all the applications that your users are using. You don't have to take governance actions over them. You just want to know what they are. But when a SaaS provider reveals publicly that they have been attacked or exposed or breached, and your users happen to be on the list of using those things. Here we go, Twitter. Twitter was breached on November 20 of 2019. It just so happens that some of the users in this environment have access to Twitter. Now, I know that this is very old, so if I click on my user report, it's going to show no users in the last 30 days. But I'm going to be able to get information and say, hey, this application was breached. I have these users. I need to proactively reach out to these users and say, I'm going to need you to take a corrective action. If you've been recycling your credentials between Twitter and your, on-premises or your Azure AD account, you're going to need to change your password. So I'm going to be able to get all that intelligent alerting. But again, it's also telling me about things that are publicly shared without me having to build up any rules around that. And the other thing that's really cool here too, and this is one where we've gotten a lot of questions over this over the years, and this is kind of the only place that does it. You know that when you have a laptop running Windows Defender, it is scanning that laptop from time to time. There is a regular scan interval. You know that when you move a file into a mailbox or whatever, that there is an ingestion scan against that file. But if you simply forklift a whole bunch of old data into SharePoint, the question used to be, well, is there any ongoing scanning of that data for malware? And it turns out, yes, as a matter of fact, there is. And that reporting all happens here through Cloud App Security. So now that we've drained the whole list, I'm actually going to go up and show you the actual dashboard, right? I saved the best for last. So we can actually get just a single view of what our open alerts are, apps that have been recently discovered in the last 30 days, our top users to investigate, any app connectors that may exist. If our Azure Security Center is tied into it, we're going to get that here too. Our files with malware actually reports directly straight up to the main page here too. We're going to be able to see all of our open DLP alerts, where our users are coming from. And this is kind of one of my favorite little things here too. And we're going to go into this in great detail next week. I have certain applications that I want to allow my users to go into and use, but I want to make sure that they're doing certain specific controls, like maybe not downloading files from a personal device. So in order for that to happen, I actually have to build conditional access policies in my Intune or in my Azure AD that then send users over to this environment to vet the access request that they're getting. In this case, I am now actually using Cloud App Security as a real legitimate proxy into that application. And once that has happened, I am now considered to be in a protected session. So I do this all the time. You can see this is one of the few things that I actually do get to demo pretty regularly. I've got 80 some sessions out there. Everything that my users do using this as a protected proxy server is going to be logged into this log right here. And I'm going to be able to see this little squirrely cue thing says redirected to session control. And if I come down through here, I'm going to be able to see all of the actions, all of the sessions that were attempted here. And if I go back to this and look at it as protected actions, you're going to see that, hey, legitimately, these things work. Alan tried to download some files and he was blocked. Yep, Alan was blocked there too. And let's see. If I go in here a little bit farther, hey, I was able to successfully upload some content. But again, Alan was blocked from downloading some things. And we will cover this in copious detail next week. It's one of my absolute favorite things to demonstrate in terms of Microsoft's ability to provide proxy solutions for the cloud. But again, I want to come back and just talk about a little bit about how we get our content in here. It's super important to understand that we have a number of ingress methods. We can again pull the Cloud App Security logs, the Defender ATP logs, and that shows up as our Windows 10 endpoint users. We have our global logs, which are any firewalls that we want to consume content from. And again, you saw that list. It's pretty lengthy of the types that we can measure and monitor from. But once we have those logs setting up data, remember, I've blocked applications and it put a thing back in Defender ATP. But if you're not a Defender ATP customer, you're sitting back thinking, well, that's stupid. I don't care, right? That's not going to work for me. Well, we can actually do this really cool thing too, where we can generate a block script. Okay, so if I've gone in and I've blocked 75 applications, I can come in here and generate a block script for any one of these devices. And these are principally like top categories. So if you have something that falls in there, the format's going to be pretty much the same. And when I say, okay, hey, I'm going to do a Juniper SRX block script, it's going to tell me that it's creating the block script to do all of the unsanctioned applications. And now I generate this script. I'm going to download it. And it unfortunately, it's going to pop in a different application. But you would see that it's actually got the script to do all of my blocks all as one thing. So I don't even have to be a firewall admin at this point, or a firewall genius, right? I just say, hey, we set these blocked applications up in Cloud App Security. Can you just import this file? Or, I'm the guy who doesn't have time to learn the firewall. I can just import it. No big deal. So we can take our blocks and export them back to on-premises. We can keep them out in the cloud. We can do it however we want to do. And again, we can still make it super granular through Defender ATP to make sure that the right people gain access to these applications. So it's not all or nothing. And then I think that kind of actually brings me to the end of the things I want to cover today. I don't want to go super deep into doing the proxy stuff because it is really exciting, and I want to make sure we spend some time talking about it in depth next week. The one thing I will talk about, though, is this score metric. I don't really use this a lot, but it does have some value to it, right? So we can see that we have a metric that says that overall our users are doing good stuff. But you know that I am actually using some applications at a low level that I haven't configured a score for. So I'm going to come in here to my score metric, and I'm actually going to be able to set some sliders on what we care about as an organization. I'm not really going to hold an organization their feet to the fire over how long they've existed, right? That doesn't really define quality these days. But I might be able to say, hey, are you able to do data at rest encryption? And that's important to me, right? So as an organization that's trying to drive towards specific compliance goals, I need to make sure that I am heavily weighting some things that matter to me as an organization. And then once I slide these things to where I want them to be, my score may change in terms of how my users are gaining access to things. And again, it's principally just going to be a little bubble that tells you how well you're doing. But some of those applications that looked like they were a 9, but they didn't do so great on SOC 2, if you're using a whole bunch of those and SOC 2 matters to you, your score is not going to be a big, pretty green circle anymore. It's actually going to look kind of yucky. I'm not going to save that change. Oh, did we see ITAR down there on the list? Yikes, it is there. How about that? So really briefly, though, while I'm in this, you can see that we actually have a ton of controls around settings on this. This is not going to be a simple turn it on and walk away and you get the max benefit out of this. We have integrations into Azure ATP, Advanced Threat Protection. We have integrations into Azure Identity Protection. We have hooks into Azure Information Protection. We've got behavior monitoring. We've got device. I mean, we've got all kinds of hooks that we can build into this. And what's really cool here too is that, again, with all of these great things that are going on, I'm actually also able to take the signaling that comes out of this and send it back into other security interfaces. So my favorite place to see that is actually here in the Microsoft Security Center, Microsoft 365 Security Center. If I look back at my aggregated incidents that are coming from all of my advanced security controls, whether it's Defender ATP or Office 365 ATP or whatever, I actually can see where an attack began, how it progressed, how it moved through the organization, and a reverse timeline. And you can see in this case, I have 3 active incidents that pertain to suspicious activity from Diego. Diego's my boy. But the source for this incident is Cloud App Security. And I can dig into this actual incident here and get information about it and decide, hey, when it's time to actually do some work on this, if I click on this guy right here, it's going to be able to tell me some more stuff. And then I can actually come straight into managing the incident and going into Cloud App Security itself. So I'm able to take all of my signal data and chase it both from Cloud App Security and back to Cloud App Security. So it doesn't really matter where I start my security investigation in this. All roads lead back to chasing the signal, finding out what's going on, and resolving the problem. And there is one other area that I wanted to touch on as well. But no, actually, you know what? It's going to be all next week. It's this conditional access app control. That's going to be super, super awesome. And I can't wait to tell you all about it. But that's kind of where we're going to draw things to a close today. I'm going to pass it back to Christina.
Hey, great job. It's always crazy from an end user's perspective to see like what you actually look at from the admin side. like what you actually have control over. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, and then all of that has come a long way over the last several years too. What we used to look at was awful, but now it's actually super usable. I mean, traditionally admins were the last ones to get a usable interface, and now we are getting really, really high quality, not just interfaces, but the actual UI around them is becoming very high quality, and we're no longer having to try to dig through tons of rabbit holes to find useful information. So yeah. It's a crazy thing to look at, but it's so much better than what it used to be.
Yeah. And don't erase my TikTok. So, and the webinar that Adrian is talking about next week is same time, this time, 12 p.m. Eastern, next Thursday, September 10th, and it will be on web protection services is kind of the big summary of it. But as Adrian said, super excited. Has anyone have any questions? There are none in the chat box, but if you have any, you can drop them in, shoot us an email. You will be getting this recording either this afternoon or tomorrow morning, so you will be able to rewatch this, save it to whoever. And yeah, keep up with us on social and our events page to see upcoming webinars. We've got this one next week, and then I think we're scheduling one towards the end of the month and into October. But I'm not seeing any questions. Adrian, once you're great as always. Thank you everyone so much for joining us, and register for the one next week. It's going to be really good, as we've said 100 times. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.